10 seconds for it actually shows up on the websites. So we should be going live about now. Okay, hey everybody. We're gonna wait for a few minutes, a minute here, two here to let everyone come in. Matt was just chatting about his plans for the weekend. Sounds like he's gonna get away. Huzzah!
That's
It's
right.
kind of funny every time I hear a tech person tell me that they want to get away. It's like I have to go somewhere where there's no internet, right? Like their idea of a relaxing time is like the middle of nowhere with no cell service, and it's like a universal thing.
Yeah, we all want to go be hermits. Like that's our like post burnout, post, retirement plan is I just want to go off in the woods somewhere where nobody can reach me and talk to me and I don't have to look at another computer ever again.
It's got to be like a more PC version of like the old meme, which is like a tech enthusiast has like all the smart thermostats and smart technology in his house, and like a technology professional has like a printer from 2004 on his desk and a loaded shotgun next to it in case it makes weird noises. Like I feel like that's probably the more PC equivalent of how you describe that sentiment.
Yeah, that's true. Like and some people might assume because it's, oh, I don't trust the technology and that kind of stuff, but like I also don't have a lot of that stuff in my house because I don't want to manage it.
I know.
I just don't. I get enough computers and things in other parts of my life and career that managing a whole bunch of technology around my house is not what I want to do. So I try to keep things as simple as possible to still
I
be
got
able to do what I want to do and get, that value, for the family to be able to watch what we want to watch or listen to what we want to listen to. But yeah, I don't have automated garage doors and locks and doorbells and cameras and any of that stuff.
I mean, it's true though, because I got a Nest thermostat, and Google forces you now, like you can't turn it off to do that eco mode, which it's like relies on the Nest like motion, has like a motion detection inside of it. So every time I leave my house, I have to check my phone every few hours in the summer because for whatever dumb reason, that eco mode doesn't detect my dogs. So if I leave, the house is gonna bake and my dogs will like die of heat stroke. So I'm like, stupid thermostat. I'm this close to going back to the regular. I put it in because my wife likes to change the temperature, like turn it up and turn it down in the middle of the night, and I got tired of like going downstairs. So I'm like, okay, here's the phone, right? And ever since I've done that, I'm like, I think I made more work for myself.
They
It's not
have.
helping.
No.
Then I see like the stories of like the Samsung fridge, and I'm like, oh no, they're gonna tell me it because I didn't pay my subscription. I can't get my jug of milk.
Yeah. I just the industry has succeeded in getting folks to get close to the upgrade cycle of computers with TVs. And I worry that the more and more smart appliances we have, we're going to start getting more and more things in our households that they're pushing to these upgrade cycles of every 3 to 5 years, just like computers have always been for
Ever.
TVs and
I mean,
appliances and refrigerators. And
I'm not
I mean,
alone
that
in
would
saying
just suck. I
I'm
like
not
to
alone.
buy things and keep them for forever and not going to work with all the tech now.
I'm not alone in saying this. I really think the epitome of smart TV, like the best it could have been, was like the Google Chromecast. Like you could plug that
Mhm.
little sucker into a TV you've had for 5 years, add all this capability to it, really push it for its worth, and it was this low $30 dongle. Like it, that in my mind it blew my mind. Right? I was like, this is awesome. Like the
Yep.
value, what it offered, what it put in, I would love that. And it's sad, man. Like that's not the way the industry went. They're trying to go to that exact model you're talking about. It's all baked into this very not greatly made piece of electronics that you know is going to break on you in 2 years. And every 2 years, if you want a TV, you got to
Yep.
pay another $500.
Yeah, I don't have the smart TV. I use the Roku and the Chromecast just for that very reason. I'd rather update that every 2 to 3 years to get more capabilities than to upgrade my entire TV. I'd rather spend more on a good screen and not worry about all of the extra stuff built into it.
Well, I think we've given enough time at this point. We are currently streaming on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn, so hopefully some people have tuned
Wow.
in. I found that counter in our window is never super reliable. Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. This is Logan Edmonds, CEO of Tabernacle Technology Solutions. I am joined today by a special guest. I'd like to introduce Matt Gersh, CEO and founder of Fosivity. Matt does all the stuff that I don't like to do when it comes to compliance and cybersecurity, and I feel like it's vice versa sometimes. Like I don't think you'd like to do what I do.
No, absolutely. I've been there and run IT and security programs and infrastructure and cloud operations, cloud infrastructure, all of that stuff, and been the hands-on systems administrator and network administrator and everything guy. And these days, like you said, I focus on a very tight niche in security with governance, risk, and compliance. A lot of assessments and policy work, process improvement work, that sort of thing. And I try to stay as far away from being hands-on with technology as possible. And I know that's the opposite. You want to be hands-on with stuff and building
You
out
like
and,
nuts
and
and
supporting
bolts.
those things. And it works well for us to pair together on projects because
Yeah,
I do things you don't want to do and find excruciatingly boring, I'm sure. And you do things that I don't want to touch anymore.
Well, I mean, to that regard, you just mentioned, so those of you who were paying attention, Matt does a lot of regulatory compliance work, working to make sure that companies are properly being vetted based on whatever regulatory or contractual needs they have and living up to the deal. But why? Why would anybody want to do that, right? Like nobody willingly, in my mind, submits themselves to an outside audit. Well, turns out there's a pretty big reason. In today's story, we're going to chat about pretty much highlights one of the lowest level reasonings why you would want to do this kind of stuff or why there would be regulations asking for this kind of stuff. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen real quick and turn off the QR code so people can see your lovely face, Matt. Doo-doo. So, the article we're talking about today is from bleepingcomputer.com, and it's the headline kind of says it all, but not really. Ransomware hackers dwell time, aka the amount of time they stay inside of another company or organization systems, has dropped to 5 days, with remote desktop protocol still widely being used. What was your take on this? I know you read it a couple times.
Yeah, number one, I'm not surprised at all. And actually, if anything was surprising uh, to me, it was that dwell time is that long before they take action, because that dwell time is until they're detected. So that could be detected by the organization who catches it before they can do damage, but it also could be detected when they actually execute their attack. So for me, in some ways, I'm almost surprised that it's that long as well. But if you think about that from a perspective of a business owner or an executive, to know that the average right now in the industry is that somebody unauthorized, some criminal is in your system for a median of 8 days uh, across the industry, that's kind of scary.
I mean, yeah, it makes sense though in a lot of ways. Like, I think more and more the general perception, people understand for the most part what ransomware is now. Like, we've heard about it enough in mainstream news, and there is some basic mitigation going on across the board in a lot more cases. I think these criminals too. The thing about ransomware people doesn't understand is it's fairly easy from a technical sophistication point to execute. So it makes sense for them to cut down their time because less chance they're going to get detected, and the amount of finesse you need to run a ransomware attack is nowhere near the level you do with other kind of like business email compromise. Those social engineering schemes. And I think the article does talk about that. Those have actually gone up. Like they're taking a little more time to do their due diligence in those. Ransomware, it's get access to the system, start taking a hammer to everything. That's the operational procedure with encryption. So that makes sense. That always made sense to me. Like,
Yeah.
why would a ransomware operator want to stay in somewhere longer than they have to? Their goal is to get in, wreak havoc, get their leverage, and get out, and do that as quickly as
Yep.
possible.
Yep. And generally, I think the time that they spend there is setting things up.
Yeah.
They get in and they've got to take their time to sort of lay the minefield, so to speak, so that they can flip that switch. But they're also often exfiltrating data as well.
Mm-hmm.
So the ransom comes with, if you don't pay the ransom, we're not going to give you your systems back or decrypt your stuff. But there's also an extortion angle often these days as well, where if you don't pay the ransom, we're going to release
I mean, we
publicly
saw
the
that with
data that
Claw.
we've stolen from you in the process. So that time that they're there, they're both getting things situated for the ultimate attack and also copying data out that they can use against you.
I mean, that goes without saying. I think everybody if they didn't know before knows now, they need to make a backup. And that was always like the big thing they relied on is nobody had backups. Well, not everybody's got a backup. They need some other point of leverage. And that blackmail portion is critical to that. Like, it doesn't matter if you have a backup if they just dump your stuff on the clear. We saw Klopp do that not too long ago with the Move It breaches. They started dumping some life insurance companies' information all over the public internet just to shame the rest of the companies they had ransomed into paying them.
Yeah.
They burned one of their prospective customers, quote unquote, to sort of drive fear into all the rest.
Yeah.
I think it also means they're getting more efficient. That's what I read too. Like the fact that they're able to decrease from what they drop from 9 days to 5, they're just getting a lot more efficient on how quickly they get in and out.
Yeah, and there is also the flip side of this that I think may be part of it too, is there is the possibility in these numbers, and you can't tell from way that they're
Mhm.
provided in the article, there is the possibility that some of these have come down too because organizations are detecting them earlier, because
Yeah,
organizations are deploying the tooling that they need, and they're training their people, and they have the people and the tools necessary to detect and respond to these things as well. So that, because that's also the other piece in this with dwell time, is whether they're detected or whether they are detected when they execute their attack. It
sure.
could be either, and the article doesn't go into that. Like, the optimist in me would like to think that the industry is getting better at detecting, uh,
Well,
but I don't know that that's the case.
let me play the pessimist side now. If you're going to be the optimist, I'll be the pessimist, which is what we know about ransomware actors is they tend to be organized into these crews. At least the criminal side of them does. Let's not talk. Let's exclude state governments for the purpose of this conversation for now. And the people who are actually executing these attacks half the time aren't very technically gifted. They're using pre-scripted kits, tools that have been developed for them in advance. So they're kind of meat cleaver in that regard, right? Like they're a very blunt instrument. So that how much of this is protecting those people versus the actual sophisticated actors that have a bit more finesse? Because,
Yeah.
like you said, you're hoping the industry is adapting. But what I've seen on the tactical side is they're adapting with some automated stuff, which is great. Don't get me wrong, we want that, but it's definitely not. It's not unbeatable. Like, not even hard to beat.
Yeah. There something that I hear from a lot of clients, uh, is, and other, and small business owners especially, is, we're too small
Oh
to be
gosh,
a
I hear that
target.
all
And,
the
so what, what that says is, we believe in our risk model that we aren't interesting for a targeted attack. And that may be true. But what that ignores is that there is also the risk for opportunistic
Oh,
attacks
absolutely.
here.
And
And
scale and
many,
scale.
many of these attacks are opportunistic, where the criminals are just looking for the easy target. And, hey, there's somebody left that the article even mentions leaving remote desktop protocol, RDP,
Yep.
open to the internet.
Did you
18%, according to
did
the
you
article, that was used. And that lines up with what I've
was
seen.
it only 18%? I thought it was a lot higher than
It's
that.
it's much higher, because they lumped internal in there as well. But in 18% of them, it was
And
used externally
I didn't catch that.
into the network, not just to move
So that
within
makes
the
more sense.
network.
I thought the number was still stupid high
Uh,
because how many people know not to do RDP now? But that makes more sense. They're including
yeah,
internal
it is.
campaigns.
But within small business, in the last several years, I'm not doing incident response today, but I have done some of that in the past. And sort of things, the recurring themes that we would see, that a lot of times were there, is RDP was open to the world. There was
Yep.
a lack of MFA, multi-factor authentication, to help protect that. And had that been in place, it would have protected, or at least made it significantly harder.
We
And use of poor passwords, weak passwords, those kinds of things. Somebody's got an accounting account, and the password is accounting, and they've exposed it to the world, and it's
I'm
simple
gonna go ahead and
hygiene
just say
things
a statement
that
might be a little.
folks do, and
Oh,
it's
sorry.
not it, I don't know, it's not good. And another comment you had made, though, as well, with the skill level of these attackers, I mean, these the reason that ransomware is so common and has really ticked up in the last few years, and I know you and I have talked about this, so I'm not telling you anything that you don't already know, but ransomware as a service is a thing. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
it has been built into a commercial platform, and these are commercial enterprises now that are criminal
And it's not
organized
just
crime
ransomware
enterprises,
anymore either. It's all the
right?
cybercrime. Like you can have phishing as a service now. You can have exfiltration as a
Yeah.
service. I was watching a presentation by a pretty well-known vendor. I think I can say it's under NDA. ThreatLocker. You know who those guys are, right? ThreatLocker. They're big in the cybersecurity space, and they were doing a demo, and they were just showing like a posting on the dark web. It's literally some dude in Russia. He was Russian in nature, and he said, for $500 in the equivalent of Bitcoin, I will get remote access to any target you want phone. Like, just tell me who I need to do, and I can guarantee within 4 weeks I'll have access to it. And he's selling that for a commoditized service, right? Like a one-time payment of $500, and it's just like a link. It looked like a Craigslist ad. It literally looked like an old 2008 Craigslist ad. You know what I'm talking about, with like the little text and how that antiquated feel. But that's happening.
Yeah. And the article talked about like the days of the week that this happened. Like, they tend to do after hours. Uh, I thought it was interesting that uh, the initial compromise happens
Mm,
during the work week, that Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then the attack, like the damaging attack, generally is on a Friday or Saturday when folks have trouble uh, responding. But as I said, these are criminal enterprises, and
yeah.
they may have different teams often even doing this, that you have one group that are making the initial compromise and then another group that comes in that may be more skilled to actually set up and finalize the attack, and where they are, because that barrier to entry, because these tools have been put into place, we've seen an increase in these damaging attacks. But that doesn't mean that there's nothing that can be done about them. You mentioned
No,
backups, and
it's
that
just
was the heart wrenching thing. Being involved with incident response, it was heart wrenching to see a small business realize that their backups weren't viable, that they thought they had backups and they weren't. Either the attacker went after the backups and encrypted them, or deleted them, or they hadn't tested them. That was like
yeah.
the
Oh
worst
my
one. It
gosh.
was they
Well, with
hadn't
the
tested
thing,
it and they have them, but they didn't realize that they're somehow corrupted or that they can't
there's a
restore
there's a
them
mantra.
properly.
There's a mantra you're supposed to go by, which is untested backups are just wishful thinking. Like that's the
Yeah.
IT mantra. If you don't test your backups, it's just wishful thinking.
Yeah. And the heart-wrenching, just watching, being on that battle bridge, the conference call with the clients and their tech team, as they're realizing that their options are very quickly whittling down because they don't have
Oh,
backups
absolutely.
and they
I,
don't have things documented to be able to know how to restore. So there's a lot that goes into building your program
I actually
to
have a couple
protect
of
for
things to be
this,
comment on this.
and
Like
you got to make sure you can respond and recover.
I think that one of the things I'll go out and just say now, you were mentioning about multi-factor and password security before. I would say with and we're going to talk a little, this is as technical as I get on this talk, but with the tech of phishing, how phishing's evolved in the last few years, a password by itself, no matter how good it is or how unique it is no longer any kind of security. Because I mean, part of our things we do in our risk assessment is we just show what a password cracker can do, right? Like just run it
Mhm.
on a computer, run it in like in a CMD full thing. Look at all these passwords that are just hanging around in memory that you typed 2 weeks ago, but because you haven't rebooted your computer or because you clicked save to Chrome or whatever, it's just floating there. And it's as easy nowadays as getting you to click a link on an email and boom, I have your password. Like that is, and we're seeing that happen in real time in a lot of cases. Um, I've seen an uptick in reports, and I think that's what you're saying before, though. Like that idea of the initial infiltration is happening during business hours. I would attribute that, and without having all the data in front of me, take a grain of salt. But phishing and social engineering is probably a big part of that. Like their people are working, they're checking their email, their IM, their whatever, and they're
Absolutely.
getting tricked to click stuff or download stuff, and that's how they get their initial hook in.
Yeah. It's very, very rarely a targeted, sophisticated attack. Like that's the area of corporate espionage and state actors and that sort of thing. The opportunity or the opportunistic attacks that we're seeing aren't
Well, in
that.
20
And they're logging in. They get the credentials and they just log in.
in
These
2020
are
and
not
20
highly technical attacks often.
even in 2021, though, we're talking about stats for a second. I reference a stat all the time. Even as far back as 2021, 77% of detected data breaches were financially motivated, and only like 5% could be attributed to espionage. Now, of course, those stats can be fluid because attribution is always the hardest aspect of anything, right? Like in this specific arena. But it really is like the reason we're seeing such a problem right now is just criminal opportunity. Like the amount of money that can be made in this market with very little legal culpability, depending on how you do your gang. Like for example, if you're running out of Russia, as a like we pick on Russia a lot around here. Sorry, if anybody from Russia who's a honest, good doing citizen is watching this, it's not intentional. But we do know that like Russian cyber games basically operate with international impunity as long as they don't target Russian interests. Like they're that's a thing that we all actually I think it is. I think that has the Department of Defense gone on file stating that? I thought they have. They've gone on a record
I
stating that.
couldn't tell you for sure.
Okay, so maybe allegedly. I should add some allegedly to the prior statements.
Yeah,
Allegedly.
and and all this, it sounds scary, because it kind of is. I mean, you've got, I mean, these aren't like computer bugs and things like something just randomly happens. It's a thinking, breathing human
Person.
being out there who's trying to do something to harm you and is looking for an easy mark.
Have you
Just
ever
the way, I
like
mean, this is criminal activity 101.
and but that, I think that's actually kind of so one more thing to think about because people are like, well, how do these people like live with themselves? And I think that is the case because they're doing this from their own homes and often with thousands of miles away. I don't think they view it that way. I don't think they view it as a human being that I'm harming on the other end of this. They're looking at it, and we see this all the time, like a business. Like they're treating it like a business. You are the product. You are the commodity. We will exploit you to make monetary gain because and they'll like what was it, Conti? Conti had like 300 contractors, had an HR perspective. When the Ukraine war launched, we got all the documents. They had like a bonus structure. They had like a hacker or
Help
cyber
desk.
criminal of the month. Yeah, they had a help desk. Like they treat themselves in a lot of cases like a startup, and that's how they view it. That's how they
Yeah.
rationalize it, and they don't see you as a person. So
Yeah.
I'm not. I call this the laughing while the world burns down live stream sometimes in my head. I can't actually put that on there because I'll get taken off social media platforms. But yeah, I think the only thing that you can really do proactively is just accept this is the new reality we live in the same way that I don't leave my car unlocked on a busy road in the inner city. You got to take some reasonable risk mitigations on your own to, I can't say prevent it because it's not really in the cards, but to reduce the
Yeah.
chances of something like this happening to you.
Yep. And sort of take the car example. It's not that there's nothing that folks can do. I mean, we can build a security program that is able to protect, put safeguards in place to protect the things that you want to protect. But a lot of orgs have stopped there, and anymore you just can't. You have to be able to have the capability to detect when the
Mm,
protective tools, you can't just lock the door and walk away. You got to be able to detect. You've got to have the alarm, the car alarm, or what have you, or way to get some sort of an alert. You've got to be able to respond to it, to do something about it, and you've got to be able to recover. And for the car analogy, sort of a kind of mostly non-technical way to look at it. I recently bought a new truck that has a mobile app with
it's
it,
very pretty. Your
and
food truck is very pretty.
but you can pull up, you can lock the doors remotely, you can check the status of the truck. Like, this is technology I wouldn't normally have bought, but it's hard to buy a new vehicle that doesn't have this stuff anymore. But you can pull it up on a map. If somebody does manage to get into or steal my truck, for instance, I can look up where it's located. Like, there's some ability to respond to that, and companies need to have that same thing. They need to have the tooling in place to be able to
Unless you have a
detect when
key.
something happens, to be able to respond, as well as have their backups offline, offsite, emergency, that they know work, so that they can recover and have a plan that they know how to do all of that. And it's not hard to set this up. There's an investment in money that has to be made. But one of the things that I like so much about what you're doing with Tabernacle is the ability for your customers to take advantage of the tool set that you've assembled to do all of these things and to get those capabilities really, really easily and have them being monitored by people that know what they're doing and know what to do when something happens. So they're not having to try and invent that
from the
process
ground up.
from the ground up. When it happens, the worst thing you can have is something happens and somebody who's never been trained, you don't have a process. The IT person may be a very smart system administrator, but like they look at something and they realize like, I don't know what this is, but they're not sure exactly what to do. They don't know how to report it. All of a sudden, the cognitive load.
I can't honestly say that I've never looked at something and said, I don't know what this is.
Right.
That seems to be half my career sometimes.
But the cognitive load of deciding like how do I know what to do? If it hasn't been documented and trained, it's very likely that person may look at that and be like, well, maybe this isn't a big deal, and it gets ignored.
Well,
Or they don't know how to escalate it.
Speaking of document, let me make a plug here real quick and we'll keep going. For those of you who are watching, there is a QR code in the chat. This is the only time you're going to hear anything that's like a plug. We are not trying to force anybody to buy anything. Actually, I'm a big believer that education is the most powerful tool we have for this, and we're talking about that right now. There is a free do-it-yourself risk assessment in the QR code beneath us. So if you like to start somewhere and you're just wondering where to begin, that's free. Take it, power to you. But scan that QR code, get your free DIY risk assessment. But continue, Matt. I'm sorry, I saw the opportunity, I had to take it. But go ahead.
Yep. Absolutely. But not having that response plan, not knowing who to call, and people having to make those decisions in real time, knowing what to do and what not to do in that moment is it's dangerous, because they may ignore it, they may do the wrong thing, they may potentially destroy evidence that's going to be needed during the forensic investigation if they do the wrong things.
I want you to elaborate on this a little, because a lot of people operate under the premise like this stuff we know bad stuff's been happening for decades now, right? Nothing bad has happened to me yet, though, because of it is what a lot of, I think, of business leaders and others look at. Like, hey, I had this incident in 2008, for example. I talked to a guy a while back whose website got taken over by Hamas back in like 2011. And that was like his cybersecurity. He was like, haha, it was funny. We got it fixed the next day. No harm, no foul. Well, nowadays, that's not really the case anymore, because there's a lot of ramifications, both operationally and legally. And you're way more, I think, qualified to talk about that. Take a minute and kind of elaborate for our audience, like sort of what can happen to you if something happens and you're not aware of it.
Yeah. So with the data privacy laws specifically that have come out as well, like there's regulatory things where certain events are reportable, and you must by law tell the affected people that their data, or customers, whether they're businesses or individuals, that their data has been compromised. And where this is starting to become more important lately, it was with the privacy laws that are being passed in various states, where if an individual's personally identifiable information is compromised, stolen, exposed during an attack like this, there are legal ramifications that if the organization doesn't notify those people who are affected within a certain amount of time. So sweeping under the rug and doing nothing is very, very quickly not an option anymore.
It's becoming more risky too. If you want to talk about risk,
extremely risky, because now you've got negligence potentially coming in here if the organization looks and decides that they're not going to take any action. So, and again, all of this sounds like really scary. And I mean, I agree that it is, but to build a program to do this, it's not hard. And the frameworks to do this have been well developed at this point. The NIST cybersecurity framework, NIST CSF, the Center for Internet Security, CIS 18. It used to be the CIS 20, and they've recently reorganized it in the last couple of years. So now it's the CIS 18. So you may see it listed as both if you're looking into this. They're great places to start, because those will help to build a security program within the organization that helps protect from end to end, from knowing all the way from knowing what it is you want to protect in the first place to how you're going to protect it, how you're going to know if something bad is happening and protective controls have failed, to how you're going to be able to respond, how you're going to be able to recover business operations for that. And it can kind of walk you through, I hate to use the term best practices, but best practices for this is the way
Best
you should
practices
operate
shouldn't
in
be
the
scary
industry.
though. Like
And
we've had best practices for legal and HR for
yeah,
years for the exact same reason, right? Like every business has to deal with it, but it's not
yeah,
unovercomable. Is that the right word? That's bad language. It's not insurmountable. That's the word I'm looking for. It's not insurmountable. Like it is, like you said, very tangible, and I think even the average person can grasp as long as they have the right person to
yep,
walk them through it. That's all they
yep,
need.
yep. It takes time to build out these programs. Defining the program doesn't take as much time as it does to actually implement the program, because implementing, you're dealing with tools sometimes and
Yeah.
changes in the environment where you may have to buy something and deploy it, and budgets and those things may stretch out.
I
And
literally just
also,
heard anybody in the audience's eyes glass over when you mentioned tools. Guys, we're
yeah,
not going to talk about tools. We promise. We're
yeah.
not going to talk about specific tools. This is just high level.
But we all know, every business leader know you need tools. You have to go buy tools. They're
Yeah.
not free. And when you go to implement them and put them in place, you have to train people, and you're going to change behavior in the
Yeah.
organization. So that organizational change of implementing new processes to use these new tools, that's the piece that takes a while. So
Absolutely.
building out one of these programs end to end is frequently a 1 to 2 year process, easily. And but the frameworks can really be a really good guiding light in all of this. And if you align your program with these frameworks, you'll be doing the things that make you not the easy mark, and somebody else is. And when for the opportunistic events, criminals that are out there, if you're not the easy mark because you've done the things that these frameworks uh, prescribe or suggest, those best practices, and get those things implemented, you'll be in a far better place. uh, and it's like I said, it's not difficult, it's just a little time consuming, because you've got to change people's behaviors, and doing this is a behavior change. It's that
Yes, it
hygiene
is.
thing. People are very much a part of the system in an
I mean, my
organization.
team recently, just to give a story, and a lot of people are thinking like, "Man, this is scary. Why are you talking about this way?" And I'm a big believer that education can talk about negative consequences. I'm not a believer in fear of uncertainty now when it comes to education. Like, I think that's a dumb way to do it, but realistic risk has to be talked about. Like, I have a CPA that tells me every year the reason I pay my taxes is because I don't want the government to come and or put me in jail, right? Like, that's a realistic risk if you don't pay your taxes. You go to jail. But I had a business that I worked with not too long ago, very small, like 4 or 5 people on staff. And I thought it was kind of crazy because they paid for our security program. They're one of our smallest partners. And obviously, I'm not going to name names or anything like that. But they had a sustained attack from a foreign IP address of someone trying to bust into their cloud environment. And it wasn't like just one chant time. It was, oh, wow, we're lighting up here. Somebody is really trying to get in. Let's go ahead and do some stuff like block all logins from outside the United States. Some basic stuff. You know what the attacker did? They shifted tactics. They actually took the time to redirect their attack coming from inside the United States and try again for this tiny little business of 3 to 5 people.
Yeah.
And like it was a solid 3 days of solid attacks. And that's the kind of world we live in now.
Yeah, and that actually kind of illustrates one of the points about doing the wrong things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's counterintuitive that when you realize that you may have a problem,
Mm-hmm.
immediately jumping to try to block them, kick them out of the system, isn't necessarily the right first move.
Mm-hmm.
Understanding what's going on, how they got in, what they're doing, is important at that point, for the very reason you describe. Is
Mm-hmm.
how they got in. You close off one entry point
And
because
they
you
just
think
come right
that's
back
how they're
in
getting in,
anyway.
and they come in,
Mm-hmm.
but now you've lost track of them, and
Mm-hmm.
you're not sure where they're coming from, or if you've gotten rid of them, what they may have done in the environment. So it's very tricky, and that's why it's so important to have professional incident responders brought in as part of your incident response plan, that you know who to call on these things, because they can ask you some questions and provide guidance in the early stage of this to figure out, is this a cyber event, or is this just an IT operations thing? Why is that system down? For instance, well, it may just be an IT ops issue.
Or
Somebody
it could be
tripped over a power cord, but
it could be the registry's been encrypted or the boot record's been encrypted because there's
it
ransomware
could
on
be
it, right? It could be
something
anything.
far more nefarious, but like they can help with that, and they can help guide through the process to not do those wrong things, to not make changes to the environment where now you're not sure, wait, did we change that or did an attacker change that? Because when you start doing things and not being methodical about it, it gets very difficult to research and understand what truly happened. And in ransomware instances, when your insurance company is going to have to get
Oh
involved
my
in that sort
gosh,
of thing,
yes. Insurance.
this forensic investigation and preserving the evidence so that it actually can be investigated in the
The
process is
difference
very
in $1
important.
million, like it can literally be difference between a payout and not. We could talk literally another half hour about the
Yes.
insurance component. Let's pause there for a second. I think we're already over time. Real quick, I just want to take a moment to reintroduce you one more time for anybody who tuned in later. This is Matt Garish. Matt is with Civity, a trusted partner of Tabernacle Technology Solutions. Matt specializes in compliance and helping businesses meet various regulatory or contractual needs as it relates to their security programs and all the things that come with that. Matt, thank you so much for being on today. I really
Yeah,
appreciate
thank
it.
you. This has been fun, Logan. I appreciate you having me on.
In the spirit of education, one more time, I'm going to say this. I am a big believer in teaching people what to look for. I don't believe in selling fear of uncertainty and doubt. Right beneath here, we are giving a $500 value DIY risk assessment. Normally, I would charge somewhere around the ballpark of $500 to give that thing that I'm giving away free right now for anybody who wants it. So if you'd like to learn more about what you can do or where to start, because we talked a lot of big and scary stuff today, right? And a lot of time, all people need to know is where to start. Help yourself to that right now. No commitment, no cost. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. And Matt, thank you again.
Yep. Thank you.